All right, so let's have a look at relative pronouns with where in the adjective clause. These ones are similar to other ones that we've done where we end up with two subjects in the sentence. So let's just take a look at what's happening when we use where. So if we read A, okay, it says the building is very old. Should be a period there. He lives there. Okay, and then when we think about where there is in that building. Okay, and this is important because this preposition in can factor into how you create the sentence. Okay, so we've got the building is very old, he lives there. So when we want to combine those sentences and we're talking about where he lives, okay, that's the sentence we end up creating. The building where he lives is very old, and where is in that building. But that information is understood, so we don't need to repeat it. Okay, so we're not going to say the building where he lives in that building is very old. Okay, so this idea of where, or the relative pronoun where, replaces the idea of in that building. So far, so good? Hope so. Okay, so that's number one. But like other adjective clauses we have looked at, there are other ways that we can say this as well. Okay, we can say the building which he lives in is very old. Okay, notice what happens when we use which. We have to use this preposition in, because now we don't have any word in the sentence that tells us about location. So if we choose the word where and combine it like this, then that preposition in we don't need. If we choose to combine it like this, using the relative pronoun which, then we do need that preposition in, and without it, it's a problematic sentence. When we look at our considerations around different ways that we can combine sentence number 2, we could say the building which he lives in, we could say the building that he lives in, and we could say, are you thinking? The building he lives in is very old. Okay, so we could have nothing there, because here we have the subject and here we have the verb. Okay. Because we have a preposition and we have the word which, we also have a third choice. Okay, and our third choice is number 3 down here. What do you think this one's going to be? If we're going to combine the word which and in for number 3. Is this what you said? The building in which he lives is very old. Okay, and that's all right too. So just to review, when we are using the relative pronoun where, we have choices. We can choose which, that, or nothing, or the preposition plus which. Okay. Actually, let me go backwards. We can choose, let me just erase, hang on a sec. Oh, I didn't want to erase all of that. Just a minute. Okay, sorry about that. So if we're going to choose which, that, or nothing, then we have to have that preposition in the sentence somewhere. If we choose where, then we don't need the preposition. In fact, you can't have the preposition anywhere. So my advice is, when you are looking at your exam on when it comes up for your midterm, is if you're going to use or combine the sentences using the word where, because you're talking about a location, I would avoid these ones. because if you use the word where, then you don't have to worry about the preposition at all. Okay, and it's a perfectly good, correct sentence, and is probably the most common way that we speak anyway. Okay, so now that we've looked at where, let's jump over and look at when, because really the rules here are pretty similar to what's happening with what's happening with where. All right, so the relative pronoun when in adjective clauses tell you time. Okay, so they deal with time. Okay, so where deals with location and when deals with time. So our sentence B here says, I will never forget the day I met you then. Okay, so when did I meet you? I met you then, at that time, on that day. Okay, so all of this tells us when. So like the prepositions where we're looking at, like the relative pronoun where, here we're combining the sentences where when joins the two ideas. I'll never forget the day when I met you. Okay, and here is our adjective clause. Okay. And like the other one, we also have choices. I'll never forget the day that I met you. I'll never forget the day I met you. For when, we don't use which in here. I'll never forget the day which I met you. Okay? It's not used to replace when in a sentence. And then our last choice is to do that preposition plus relative pronoun combination. So I'll never forget the day on which I met you. If we come back and we look at number 2 here, I'll never forget the day that I met you on. We could add that preposition on the end if we wanted. But remember, one of the things that we talked about with prepositions at the end of the sentence is that English doesn't really like that. So that's why we have this particular construction. And in a sentence like number 2, in speaking, and probably in writing as well, we would leave this preposition out. Okay, it depends whether or not the sentence had more coming after it. Then we may put that preposition back in. So like the ones with the relative pronoun where, when you're dealing with location, in these ones where your relative pronoun is when, and you're dealing with time, my advice is to use the most natural construction, which is number 1. I'll never forget the day when I met you. All right, so now head over to my English lab and check and see what practice has been assigned, and we can go through some of the exercises using when and where in class. As well as practice on my English lab, you can also check your Azar textbook. The theory and concepts of where are on page 282, and then you can do exercises 25, 26, and 27. And the chart with when on it is on page 284 in your Azar textbook, and please do exercise 29 and 30. So do these exercises and check the answer key. They're fairly straightforward, so I don't think you should have any trouble with them, but if you do, please make sure you ask. All right, we'll be able to take some time to review these in class as well.